Ну, спасибо, Патрик. А если вы меня позволите, я хочу несколько слов говорить по-русски, чтобы доказать, что вы не единственный иностранец в IFC, который говорит по-русски. Но шутки в сторону, я просто хотел бы поблагодарить организаторам конференции, то есть Дальнего Востока, представительство Якутии и всем жителям этого города Якутска. Мне здесь очень нравится, и я сам американец, и никогда не представил себе, что у меня будет возможность посетить такой город. Ну, спасибо вам. Okay, and then back to English. So as Patrick mentioned, we at IFC, we see a great potential for distributed generation, specifically through renewable energy at mines. And as he alluded to earlier, the mining industry in Russia is, simply put, enormous. I'm sure most people know about the oil, gas, coal, but on top of that, metals and non-metals. Russia produces 14% of the world's mineral extraction. In 2012, there was $48 billion in investments into this sector. It's the top 10 producer in over 50 commodities. Again, oil, gas, gold, silver, even some metals I had never heard of. But the problem, or one of the challenges, is that over 50% of these resources are located east of the Urals. So those are regions like Yakutsk, Siberia, regions that are far removed from infrastructure and the typical isolated regions that we're speaking of. As a whole, on a global scale, energy use in the mining sector, electricity is a major operating cost for mines. Globally, the industry uses 400 terawatt hours of electricity on an annual basis. For a typical open pit mine, electricity alone constitutes 25% of their costs. If it's an underground mine, we're looking at 40%. So this is a massive amount of expenditures that a company has to pay just for supplying electricity. And the mining and metal industries, they also make up 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And for mines in remote regions, this is even more of an issue. There's a heavy reliance on diesel fuel. This can be exponentially more expensive if you can't take into account delivery costs. Many of these places have only a short window when the winter roads are frozen to deliver fuel by truck. It even goes as far as some fuel supplies are by helicopter, so this is incredibly expensive. These resources, they're found, again, far away from energy infrastructure, and if we speak about isolated communities where people live, sometimes these are the closest settlements to these mines, and these mines are 300-400 kilometers from them. So these are isolated even from the isolated communities. And as we further exhaust the resources, exploration is going further and further into more remote and hard to reach locations. So this is going to become even more of a problem in the mining sector. We look at a company like Barrick Gold. Barrick is the largest gold mining company in the world. They have 19 mines on 4 continents. And then in addition to this, they have a number of exploration and processing operations. Annually, they spend $1.2 billion just on energy. And not all of their mines are isolated. Some of this is grid-tied. But for the isolated mines, they use 5 million barrels of diesel fuel consumed annually. So for them, they are seeking strategies to displace this diesel fuel to reduce their energy costs. And one way they have looked at doing that is through renewable energy applications at mines. There was a study that said in 2013, the investments into renewable energy in mines was about $210 million. While this isn't a small amount, they expect it to grow by 2023 to $3.9 billion. And this is due to expected increases in diesel costs, volatility of the diesel fuel price, and as renewable energy gets cheaper. Some case studies that we've seen. There is, again, Barrick Gold. They have a gold mine in Puerto Colorado, Chile. It's an interesting mine. It's actually located 4,110 meters above sea level, and the wind park that they built there for $70 million is actually in the Guinness Book of World Records as one of the highest wind parks in the world. It is a 20 megawatt park. They're expecting to expand it to 36 megawatts, and this displaces 40,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. And Barrick has been very committed to not only self-generating but also purchasing renewable energy, and to date 50% of all of their electricity is from renewable sources. This is another great example. This is the definition of an isolated mine. This is in northern Canada, and the mine is actually an underground mine in the middle of a lake. I forget the name of the lake, but it's 300 kilometers north of the grid. It's only accessible when the lake freezes over and there's a winter road, 2 months out of the year basically. When the winter is warm, the supplies are disrupted. And in a place like this, it's not only an issue of operations, it's also an issue of safety and the health of the people working there, because if they lost their supplies, it could seriously affect the people at the site. So their solution, they installed 4 Enercon 2.3 megawatt turbines. These were specially adapted for low weather conditions. The blades were fitted with anti-icing technology. And after it was built, operated and owned by the company, Rio Tinto, and it displaces about 4 million liters of diesel every year, and it supplies about 10% of the site's power. And they see annual savings of about $5 million, and the payback is about 6 to 8 years, I think is what I read. It's not just wind at mines. An example is the Codelco mine in Chile. This is a copper mine, and this is actually solar thermal that they use in their leaching process to process the copper. They need a large amount of thermal heat, thermal power. I think it's 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, because they basically submerge the copper into an acid bath and run an electrical current through it. So the company built a solar thermal plant to meet those needs. 15,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and it has also prevented disruptions in the diesel supply. Another case is Chronomet in South Africa. This is a chrome mine. For them, they had the option of connecting to the grid. This was deemed to be too expensive, so instead they opted for a 1 megawatt solar PV system. And the interesting thing about this case is Chronomet had such success with this that they spun off a subsidiary that specifically finds renewable energy solutions for mines. And they have a few other projects just through this subsidiary. Some of the operating models that you can have for a renewable energy station, facility, or hybrid station at a mine. Like the Diabit case, the company builds it, they own it, they operate it, or they contract someone to operate it for them. The second is build, own, operate by an independent power producer. So the company, the mining company, signs a PPA agreement with a company that has built this facility there. At the end of the PPA, they can renegotiate the terms or remove the assets. And a final one is similar to that, where they build, own, and operate, but then transfer it. So again, an independent power producer builds and runs the facility under a fixed term, and at the end, the ownership of the facility can be transferred perhaps to the company, or it can be transferred to a community for perhaps electrification. And some of the key factors in the success of these programs: the longer the PPA, the more competitive the power price, the larger the projects, the better the price and more efficient the project execution. And perhaps most important is the need for people that are experienced in this field. Typically, mining companies are not in the business of renewable energy, so they need to know who to talk to, who to develop these projects, and how to develop them. So for some of the challenges for renewables at mines, these are some of the challenges that exist with any project. There's a perception issue that renewables are expensive or that they're unreliable. As we've seen throughout the conference, the price of renewables are decreasing, and if it's a hybrid system, it can be 100% reliable. Again, there's the issue of high upfront costs. It costs a lot more to build a wind turbine or to install solar panels than it does to buy a diesel generator in the short term. Again, it's difficult to know the right people to talk to, and perhaps most importantly, as with any project, you need to tailor the solutions to the demand and the resource. So it seems obvious, but if there's no wind resource, you're not going to put in a wind turbine. So, and there's some other issues not having nothing to do with renewables, but perhaps having to do with the mining sector. They're often unfamiliar with outsourcing their mission-critical power. These are often, for good reason, very conservative companies. They like to keep everything in-house and like to do everything on their own. They as well face capital constraints, and this limits the ability to invest into new projects. And again, mines often operate fairly independently and like to do things on their own. I think Patrick had spoke to this yesterday. We'll just briefly go over it. Basically, the trends for renewables is a downward trend in the costs. Wind projects are 6 to 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Solar PV grid tied is 9 to 20 cents per kilowatt hour, as opposed to diesel fuel, which is volatile, and a good guess would be that it's going to continue to increase despite the volatility. Hybrid technology is able to provide uninterruptible power. There's a good track record with these systems. They run from small to large, and they can provide or displace anywhere from 10 to 90% of the diesel fuel. And these are attractive projects. I think, again, Patrick talked about this yesterday, but at $1.12 a liter, a solar diesel hybrid has a 20% IRR. And this allows the company to mitigate the financial and operational risks. It allows them to avoid the volatility in the diesel fuel market, and it allows them to set a long-term energy price strategy. And finally, it helps these companies to satisfy corporate social responsibility targets, to add a green aspect to their company, to increase the environmental protection of their company. Again, this is just a chart showing different IRRs of these projects at different diesel prices. So at 78 cents per liter, which is a typical price of diesel in, I believe, that was in Asia, has a 10% IRR. $1.12 has a 20%, and $1.12 is a typical price in sub-Saharan Africa. So IFC has provided support for renewable energy projects in mines and in other captive power situations. We can provide feasibility studies. We have global expertise that has experience in these areas. We can provide detailed resource assessments, helping companies to know what resources there are, what resources they're underutilizing, and what their diesel use and fuel use in general is, and their general electricity costs. We can move from that to project development. We can work with developers or sponsors to develop an infrastructure project and get the project from feasibility to execution. And as Patrick spoke to yesterday, there is also financing that is available for certain projects. This can be in debt or equity. It can be structured around any one of the models I was speaking about, anywhere from the company owning and operating the system to build, own, operate, and transfer. And IFC can finance up to 35% of a project, depending on a number of factors. And one platform that IFC has developed in the advisory services wing is our power diagnostic service. And this essentially is a way to help companies that may not know how to develop or who to talk to or what to do with a renewable energy or captive power application at their site. It's not just mines, it's any industrial enterprise or company. But basically what it does is it identifies clean energy supply options, and the goals are simple. It's to reduce costs, it's to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, it's to provide clean energy, and it's to increase the reliability of the power supply. And again, this also strengthens the green credentials of the company and helps to contribute towards attaining environmental goals or CSR responsibilities. Companies can benefit.
Cody, in fairness to the other speakers, I'm going to have to ask you also to...
Okay, I have one more slide. Well, let me just finish in saying companies can benefit from IFC expertise and proven assessment. We have a wide range of global expertise in a number of fields and technologies, and we would want to bring these to companies to develop these renewable energy projects. This is just a short outline of how the process works, but most importantly, we see IFC as playing an integral role in developing a clean and commercially viable energy supply.